Thank you for joining us today. My name is Bill Baker. I'm with Firestorm, and we're pleased to have you joining us for this webinar that is sponsored by the Eastern Great Lakes chapter of the Association of Contingency Planners and the Greater Rochester Chamber of Commerce. This is the fifth in the 2016 series of this webinar series. We also like to have friends on Facebook. You can become our friend at Firestorm Solutions, and you can follow us on Twitter, Firestorm Solo. There is a hashtag. That hashtag is Crisis Coach. Firestorm transforms crisis into value and empowers you to manage risk and crises. Firestorm expertise is crisis management, critical decision support, crisis communication, crisis public relations, and consequence management. We'd like to remind you the presentation today is not complete without the accompanying oral comments and discussion, and this information should be reviewed in conjunction with advice from your organization's personal counsel. In addition, do not interpret this information as legal advice or legal opinion. The webinar series is underwritten by the Greater Rochester Chamber of Commerce and the Eastern Great Lakes chapter of the Association of Contingency Planners. Today we're discussing why business intelligence makes you so dumb. Our presenter today is Karen Masullo. She's an Executive Vice President of Firestorm. Our host, the Greater Rochester Chamber of Commerce, is they do not have a representative with us, I don't believe, today, but we do have Dr. Michael Redman of the Eastern Great Lakes chapter of the Association of Contingency Planners. There's Dr. Michael. Dr. Redman, would you like to say some nice words about your organization?
I would, yes, thank you very much. The Association of, we're changing our name to Association Continuity Planners in September. It actually has members from areas such as cybersecurity, information security, business continuity, disaster recovery. It also includes crisis management, emergency management, and audit. So we have meetings every other Wednesday, every other month on a Wednesday, first Wednesday of the month, and we alternate between Rochester and Buffalo. And if anyone is listening to this and would like to attend one of our meetings as a guest, your first time you come as a guest is absolutely free. We'd love to have you come. And members get to call in to our meetings, so they can be from anywhere in the world and call into our meetings and listen to some really great seminars on different subjects. And of course, we partner along with these webinars every month, and that's an asset you get to have. And ACP also has its own webinars that you get to listen to. So we have quite a lot of benefits, and thank you for letting me speak about it.
Thank you, Michael.
Well, thank you, Michael. We enjoy the collaboration between both groups, and very much enjoy your participation. And I hope New York's my home, although I'm in the South now, but I'd love to get up there and visit one of your meetings at one time myself.
We'd love to have you.
My name is Karen Masullo. I am the Chief Intelligence Officer and Executive Vice President of Predictive Intelligence for Firestorm. And today we are joined by Roxanne the Wonder Dog, who is here with me. So if you hear a noise, that is Roxanne. But also I'm having a little bit of a difficulty with a sluggish internet connection this morning. And so sadly, as I move forward in the slides, they are a little bit delayed. So I do apologize if there seems to be a delay as I'm speaking in the slide itself. We'll try to move it forward as quickly as possible. For those of you who have questions or comments during the session, on the right-hand side of your screen, for most of you it's on the right-hand side, it's the GoToWebinar toolbar, and you can open that up, and there's a chat function there. And the great Bill Baker, who is our VP of Operations, will make sure that those questions are answered either during the session or forwarded to Michael or myself as appropriate after the call. So please do reach out. You can also contact us at webinars@firestorm.com. My email is kmasullo@firestorm.com, and we'll be happy to answer any of your questions or comments or concerns personally. So what are we talking about today? Today we are talking about why intelligence can make you so dumb. And we're really talking about this in terms of high-stress situations. So both business as usual and business as unusual. And the image I'm using to start this session off is from the cover of a hard copy magazine that's put out by a specialty insurance group. And this is called, it's the Insurance Research Letter, or the Letter. And it's very focused on international insurance professionals and features an article by our Firestorm CEO, Harry Ruhlin, and quote by him on the front cover of the magazine using this image. And so I thought it was interesting, sort of the rise of the machines, bit of an image here. And the quote that is used is, "Technology is changing faster than anyone realizes. The rate of change is one of the biggest exposures the world faces today. Individuals, even those working in the technology field, are no longer able to forecast what the vulnerabilities and threats are of the technologies that are being created." Interestingly, Hollywood does a better job forecasting our exposures than people do, and I think our CEO is a fan of the Terminator. But he makes an important point, and it goes along with the decision-making process. And that is the amount of data that we receive today and how it influences our ability to make decisions. Between the birth of the world and 2003, 5 exabytes of content were created. Between the birth of the world and 2003. In 2013 alone, 5 exabytes of content were created each day. It's a significant piece of data right there. And speaks to the overwhelming volume of information that we are now sifting through second by second, millisecond by millisecond. Now, for us, as in terms of survival, curiosity is a great thing. In our evolutionary past, knowing whether the sounds that we heard were predator or prey were pretty important, and then made the difference between life and death for us. So we're wired to analyze situations and get as much data as we can, because our minds are adapted for an earlier, more hazardous time. We want to fill in the information gaps when we are faced with data that may be lacking or holes in our data. And that obsession can lead us astray in our decision making, especially today when I can delay a decision by saying, gee, if I only had more information on this. Well, there are going to be 30 people wanting to give me more information on it. One of the #1 growing professions right now, if you have children who are about to go into college and they like data, the #1 role is a data scientist, someone who analyzes information in order to put it in an understandable format. We call all of this data that we use and that we want to use the seduction of data, because it's really neat to look at. It's got some really cool information in it. And in business as usual, you may have the leisure to use an enormous amount of data to make decisions. And by the way, I've never known if it's data or data. So if I go back and forth, I'm sure there's some data out there that can help me reach a conclusion as to which is correct. To give you an idea, if the exabytes example wasn't enough, to give you an idea, every day we create 2.5 quintillion bytes of data. Now, I don't know about you, but quintillion is a very large thing to me, and possibly only someone who manages the national debt could understand what that means. To give us a little bit of context, the nice folks at VoucherCloud who made this infograph say that 2.5 quintillion bytes of data would fill 10 million Blu-ray discs, the height of which stacked would measure the height of 4 Eiffel Towers, which still just seems like an enormous thing to me. 90% of the world's data today has been created in the last 2 years alone. So in business as usual, you use data in a variety of ways to make decisions. You may be a business that sells data. You may be a business that buys data. Even a mailing list that we purchase or use is data that is an example of data we might buy. In political campaigns, every decision is based on an analysis of data, and data moves very quickly, and there's an awful lot of it. So it's no wonder, is it, that quite often when a politician says something based on an immediate analysis of data, the next day they end up walking back what they said. Well, politicians may have the leisure to do that, but businesses, when their very survival depends on great leadership or supplying great information to leadership and decision making, doesn't always have that sort of luxury. You can't just walk something back and not lose all of your customers, your vendors, community support. So in business as unusual, we are stressed to make decisions quickly and well, and it may be based on a variety of data, and how do we know the data we're using is the right data? There are different types of data. First is structured data. We're more familiar with structured data than anything else because we've been working with it longer than anything else. It's information and usually text files. It's displayed in titled columns and rows. It's easily sorted and ordered, and it can be data mined. And the best way to picture it is a nice, orderly, organized file cabinet of information. Unstructured data is that stuff that we're just creating reams and reams and reams of faster than anyone can understand, along with structured data. There's a great deal of unstructured data out there. It is data that can't be so readily classified and filed. Tons of social media information, photos, graphic images, videos, streaming instrument data, web pages, PDF files, and the list goes on and on. When Firestorm first created its predictive intelligence practice, Jim and I, about 5 years ago, were trying to figure out how we could better assist schools and businesses with predictive intelligence that helped us spot behaviors of concern of employees, customers, etc., in order to prevent workplace violence. And now we've branched out into preventing other situations of concern to businesses. But at that time, we needed tools that allowed us to look at huge amounts of aggregate data and then telescope and focus in on very specific conversations and people and sort and analyze that data in a way that made sense. And that's really what we're talking about here when we talk about structured and unstructured data and some other types we're going to look at, is the ability to look at that and make real sense out of it instead of just having a massive amount of information come our way, especially in times of stress. And the last piece is dark data. And dark data is operational data that's not being used. Gartner describes dark data as informational assets that organizations collect, process, and store in the course of their regular business activity, but generally fail to use for other purposes. And I thought the best way to illustrate that would be to illustrate it for you, so I made a drawing for you. And it's the easiest thing I've ever drawn in my life because it's dark. Okay, so once we've talked about the different types of data, now we have to talk about managing the data. Who does it? Who manages the data? And one of the challenges we have is that not only do we and our messages and our operations and our processes and procedures get siloed, but our data gets siloed as well. So the goal of the keeper of the data, and there shouldn't be just one person, but in many organizations there are, especially if it's a small organization, the goal is to provide the right information to the right people in real time and make sure it's accurate information. If one of our warehouses has a problem with its inventory system and I provide you with tons of meaningless data from the glitch in the computer system and you're trying to make business decisions, that doesn't help you. So we need someone who understands how to provide the right information to the right people at the right time. And it has to be correct information. And that information is there for a sole reason, and that is to make good business decisions. We need to support timely and efficient decisions and assure only the most important and relevant information goes to decision makers to support their decision-making process. Years ago, I had a wonderful mentor in business when I was just first in business in my early 20s. And I mean, it was probably a year before I was allowed to write an email without him looking at it first. And for a very long time, we had worked on a major project, and I had created what I thought was a work of art email. I had put so much thought into this email because it was going to the CEO and the CMO and the CFO and the entire leadership team, and it was just this really important email, I thought. And it was the longest email I've ever written in my life, and it was very, very, very complicated and verbose. And he came back to me and he said, I could let you send this and destroy your career, but instead I'm going to explain to you that when you are communicating with the C-suite, you need about 3 bullets. Each of those bullets should be about 14 words, and you need to really get your point across because these people are making critical decisions every 10 minutes. They don't have time to read your stupid email. And I learned a very important lesson. Samuel Clemens once said, I apologize for the long, poorly written letter he had sent to a friend. He said, I just didn't have time to write a good short one. Well, data is like that. We need it to be concise, we need it to be analyzed, and we need action recommendations taken from it. Otherwise, all you have is just a big pile of socks that need to be sorted. So who owns the data? Interestingly, in a study that was done, now the study was done by the AICPA, so we're not surprised completely at the results. But even when this question is asked to non-financial institutions or non-financial organizations, and the question is asked, who owns data? Overwhelmingly, people assign ownership of the majority of data in an organization to the Chief Financial Officer. Next in line is the Chief Intelligence Officer, Chief Operations Officer, someone in marketing, someone in HR, and then a bunch of other people. I would like to say I think everybody needs to own the data, but one of the other things we have to look at is where do our continuity folks report into? And how do we make sure that continuity has a seat at that table and receives the type of information that they need? There's another thing that's really interesting here. For those people who really aren't great decision makers or haven't had a lot of training in how to go about making decisions, there was a joint study that was done by Stanford and Princeton University. It is called, if you want to look it up, On the Pursuit and Misuse of Useless Information. There used to be something called a UIQ, and that was your Useless Information Quotient. And this sort of measures that kind of an idea. And what this study talked about was really interesting. So we're just going to kind of think through it together. So what I'd like you to do is imagine that you're a loan officer at a bank and you're reviewing the mortgage application of a recent college graduate. Now, this college graduate has a stable, well-paying job. They've got a solid credit history. But when you check, during a routine check, you discover that for the last 3 months, the applicant hasn't paid a $5,000 debt to his or her charge card account. Do you approve the mortgage application or do you reject the mortgage application? If you are like 71% of the people in the study, you rejected the mortgage application. Then they went to another group, and in that other group, they gave them the exact same scenario and almost the exact same information with one slight change. And that was, there was the existence in the person's credit report of 2 conflicting reports. One that said the person had not paid that $5,000, and another that said that person hadn't paid $25,000. In order to find out which is the correct amount, you have to wait till the next day to talk to the credit agency. And overwhelmingly, people opted to wait to check with the credit agency. So when given the opportunity to defer or delay a decision, people took it. Once they got the information, which was the same information we started out with in our first group, which was that the debt was $5,000, based on the exact same information, 54% chose to approve the application. The tendency to defer decision-making can be exacerbated by social norms. We're afraid to make a mistake. We want to make sure we make the right mistake. But the additional information of that $25,000 was non-instrumental. And yet, the number of people who approved the mortgage increased because of useless information. The point of this is that we really need to be careful in our businesses, that we understand what information is coming to us and how it is actionable, how it has been analyzed, always in business as usual, but especially in business as unusual, in a crisis. Because what we do not want is the illusion of knowledge. Daniel Burstein was the librarian of all librarians, and he really understood back in the 70s what the technology revolution was going to mean to learning and the compilation of data, of the data of knowledge. And he said the greatest obstacle to discovery is not ignorance, it is the illusion of knowledge. So what does this all mean for us? Well, in the past, technology changed slowly. The threats that were created evolved over time periods that were manageable. We saw things coming. We were able to analyze it. We were able to say, oh, if you put, 3 wheels on that car, it's going to fall over on one side, so we better stick another one on there. We were able to say, as more cars get on the road, they're going to move faster than this 15 miles an hour. We probably ought to have some sort of rules around how people travel on the road. Today, the rate of change has made it such that information from yesterday might not matter at all tomorrow. Something that comes up today that I think is probably the coolest thing ever, somebody's going to have a cooler one, a better one tomorrow. I don't even try to update my phone anymore. I just hope somebody gives me a really cool one when they get tired of it. I made a graph for you to illustrate how data now affects our lives. The more data you have right now, just the more confusion you have if you don't have someone to really help walk you through it and answer important questions. And I think that's what leaders can do today. I have a really great relationship with Jim Satterfield. He's the president of Firestorm. And when I come to Jim and I say, Jim, I think we should do this or that. I've looked at information and I think this might be a good direction for us. Jim asks me a series of really hard questions. And if I don't have the answers, then I go back and analyze the data and get them. But it's a really good back and forth conversation because I need someone to ask those objective third-party questions to clear my mind and get me focused on the right track. And complexity, knowing a whole bunch of stuff, doesn't equal clarity, especially in a crisis. If you've ever gone to a restaurant or a grocery store when you're just starving, when you're really, really hungry, and there are just too many choices, you end up either overspending or getting something just to satisfy the immediate need, but not how you feel on the long term. And that's really what we're talking about, because data without insight is risky business. Poor data equals poor analysis equals poor business decisions. So when we make assumptions on flawed data, when we don't really understand, especially in a crisis, what that data means, we are really risking every decision that comes after it and can tumble in the whole house of cards. Plus, how do we know if we're missing data we don't know? How do we know if some of the data we're missing is created by lack of visibility within our own organization? Siloed information or leaders who withhold critical information are key signs of an unhealthy organization. So again, we need everyone at the table. And flawed data is simply a distraction. It distracts you and makes you think you need to be addressing this issue when the core issues that you really do need to be addressing are missed. Here's a really simple explanation, I think. The difference between having some data and having actionable intelligence. How many emergency exits do we have in the building? Well, we have someone who has that answer, and that person tells us we have 32 exits and 18 are covered by security cameras. So not only did we get our answer, but we got a little bit more information. But the question we were really asking, especially in a crisis, is where are those exits located? Well, if the person who is in charge of the data has no idea, they've just provided us with absolutely useless data. So as no one can find their way out of the building, at least we know there are 32 potential places we could have gone if we'd had a map. So for our map of data in general, use a simple formula. Information plus insight equals intelligence. First, we gather data, we analyze it, we create insights based on experience and an analysis of the facts and figures, and that creates actionable intelligence, real action. in a crisis in your organization, even in business as usual, but in a crisis, I've been on so many calls with Firestorm clients where people are surprised that they are having any challenge making decisions at all because they're normally great decision makers. Whether we're talking about a small company, a franchise organization, or an enterprise-level multi-million-dollar company, people in leadership positions are always surprised. And there are a couple of reasons for that. First, you're under stress. Whenever I think of the West Virginia water crisis, where the CEO of the water company that poisoned the river stood in front of cameras with a bottle of water in his hand when nobody could get bottled water in the area. And he hadn't slept for 2 days. And he was tired, he was stressed, it showed on his face, he certainly wasn't thinking clearly. And at one point, he wanted to end this press conference that he never should have held or been the spokesperson for him to begin with. At one point, he wanted to end it, and he said to everybody, okay, I got to go now. And one of the reporters said, whoa, 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 we're not done with you yet. And he turned around and came back. And they really just crucified him. And he had no data. He had no one there to assist him making decisions. He had no sounding board. He was on his own. And that is what we do not want to have happen to you. How do you go about making decisions? What data do you ask for in what situation? Well, you might be thinking to yourself, well, I don't know what the situation is. Well, we think you can. We think you can predict the situation. We think it just takes some planning ahead of time. Contingency planners know that. For those of you who may not have contingency planners in your organization, well, you can get some. But we sit and we work with planners, and it is the best relationship because we work with people who understand the power of predictive intelligence. We're going to look at some graphs in just a little bit that you can use to help your organization. We then need to understand what is the decision-making process, and does it change based on situation? Is your decision-making process situational, and do members of your team change based on that? Do you have a trusted, objective sounding board? And we'd like to be that for you. Well, this year, we've had a couple of different businesses that we've worked with. In one case, there was an allegation of racism that was very detrimental to the company. It's a small company, small office, division of a larger organization, but small nonetheless. And they were very panicked because this was a very high-profile situation. It was picked up nationally, and there were people picketing them, and this became a very serious situation. And there are times when you're in the middle of a situation like that where you just need a third party to come in and help you see the light of day, or at least help you see what the next decision has to be. Instead of looking at everything all at once, let's just move step by step. And then you may be able to sit back and say, what additional intelligence do I need? What additional data do I need in order to make the decisions I'm about to make? In a crisis, we know some things, especially seeing some of the things that Firestorm has worked with. First, we know that immediate information you receive is probably going to be wrong. And the challenge many times is that in the past, you might get a call from your trusted assistant or one of your peers in the leadership suite that says, sit down, we got to talk, we've got a problem. Today, you might read about it on Twitter. Your mother might call you and tell you she saw a post on Facebook. You might see a picture on Instagram of the inside of your building where something really bad is happening and you had no idea. Additionally, data is not available. Or you don't know where to go to get it. I mean, you know, when Pizza Hut first saw, you know, or Taco Bell first saw someone licking tacos on an Instagram photo, they didn't know what store it was, what location it was, when that image was taken, if it had been photoshopped. They didn't know anything. All they knew is that CNN and Fox News and NBC and ABC had picked it up. Next, policies don't exist in a crisis, especially if you're a really small organization. You're busy trying to build your business. You may have not had time to sit down and say, okay, we're going to need a policy around someone abusing our product on video. You then lose command and control. Your brand and reputation are under attack, and your leadership becomes involved, and they may become involved personally, and this is an important point. In the situation I had mentioned earlier, people were personally under attack. There were personal threats of violence against principals in the company on Facebook, on Twitter, and in chat rooms and in some other situations. It was frightening for the leadership team and their families. So suddenly the impacts become disproportionate to the event, and the events are quickly escalating out of control. So speed of decision making and the quality of decision making means your very survival of your business and the 5 or 5,000 people you employ. And the issue suddenly becomes the center of media focus. When you're in the middle of a crisis like this, what happens if, as you sit down at 2 o'clock in the morning when you've just found out there's something going on, you're scratching your head, having a cup of coffee, trying to figure out who else in the company needs to know. You go to boot up your computer, and you can't. Someone has leveraged the DoD attack on your company because of how high profile it was. Or someone's hacked into your systems and you can't get to the data, or there's a blackout, or your little part of the world happens to have a crisis and you can't get connected. What happens if you have no data available at all? Well, what you come down to is you can choose this or you can choose that. The way this whole webinar idea came up originally was Jim Satterfield and I were having a conversation, and we were reviewing a situation with a client. And I said, well, why did we come to this decision? And he said, you know, Karen, in the middle of a crisis, in that specific instance, and he said, in most crises I've been around, at one point, you get to make a decision between this bad decision and that bad decision, and that's it. 2 bad decisions. You got to make one. Now, what we'd like to do as your trusted partner in this is help you understand that most threats can be identified before they occur through predictive, actionable intelligence. And what we do is sit down and really customize and understand your business, your organization, the language, the people, your geographic situation. And we help you target threats and risks before they actually materialize. And that way, you have time to mitigate or eliminate those risks. This is a quote from a business that we worked with. I found the Firestorm team of senior level advisors invaluable in navigating a crisis and guiding our company. In my opinion, their counsel and judgment were instrumental. And they had a big team. We were working with a team of accountants and attorneys and financial analysts. And you just times need that objective party to help sort of wrangle the troops. So very high level, I'd like to just look at this maturity rating graph. And I'd like you to think about where you are on this, no matter the size of your team. You can be 2 people in your company, or again, 20,000. Let's think about your team and what happens when crisis occurs in your organization. You know, the first level, and the level, frankly, of many clients that call us, is that of the surprise phase, which certainly is a liability phase in maturity of decision-making and action. And this is where the process or your procedures are just developed on the fly. They're developed as a reaction to the situation, and through that there's a lot of debate. Everybody becomes an expert in what it is we should do, and there are high levels of confusion, assignments change, or this is even worse, multiple people are assigned the same thing. There are no clear processes. Some areas are completely overlooked because you got too many people doing the same thing over on this side of the room. And it's difficult to obtain any data at all to make decisions, so you're slow to identify what additional data is needed, and you're slow to issue any kind of response. It really makes you feel like you're making decisions in molasses. The events outpace your leadership. There's confusion. The executive team is consumed with this crisis, so other business, as usual, that needs to be getting done isn't getting done. And from a communications point of view, everything is confused messaging. It's very reactive. Key channels are missed. The messages aren't timely at all. Now, when we move into the reactive phase, it's a little bit better. Things are generic. Somebody said, well, I'm just going to pull a plan or a program off the web, and maybe that'll work for us. So there's going to be confusion around the decision-making process in general. And the roles and responsibilities are clearer, but they're sort of defined as needed. You know, oh, we need somebody to speak to the media. Oh, we need somebody to speak to the families of the injured employees. And you get some basic data, you know, whomever it is. If it's finance can supply you some basic sort of data. Legal can supply you some sort of basic forms. But it's difficult to obtain precise information. And there is, as a result, a lack of timely decision-making. Again, it's reactive. And there is a little bit of a sort of a message development process, but you're going to miss a lot of channels, and it's reactive messaging. In stage 3, supportive or pre-action, is where we'd like you to see you. We want to be supportive with you in this pre-action phase, where there is some good structure in place, and defined decisions are made with little debate. They're clear, they're concise, it's a more efficient process. And as a result of that, people know what their roles and responsibilities are. They get data when they need to the right people. It's event specific, it's fast organization, and this allows timely leadership quality decision making so that your employees, your customers, your vendors, your community knows that resiliency is a brand attribute, that you have taken the time to become a strong company. Again, whether you're 2 or 20,000 people. You have defined messaging, good message maps, effective and timely, and some standardized messaging going out through as many channels as possible because you've identified them beforehand. Now, stage 4 is a culture of strategic decision making. Clear playbooks, clearly defined roles, train, basic and predefined specific information for event type that, because we have time now, we have the leisure of good decision making, highly efficient and timely decision making process, and a proven messaging process as well. And this page shows you in general what just a small part of a full program or plan might look like. So we go through the variety of events that could happen in our facility or in our business. We have, you know, an HVAC problem. We have protesters on the street, nothing to do with us, but our business happens to be on that street. And then we have a code, an action code that lets you know what group is involved, what group of documents should be used, what group of messages should be used. It is a clear playbook for you and for your teams, and it allows a clear, actionable data to be used instead of the massive amounts of exabytes of data that you don't need during a major crisis. We're at the top of our time now. At the top of our time, is that the right way to say that? So let us just leave you with this. As always, we want you to predict, plan, and perform. In predicting, let us assist you. Let us help you with an assessment, a no-fee assessment. Contact webinars at firestorm.com or contact me personally at kmasullo@firestorm.com. We'll get that set up for you. We're going to look at relevant data that means something to you to create real insight and intelligence. Going to help you understand what an intelligence network is and how to set that up. And then as we move forward, we develop plans with very specific action plans for each threat that's identified, and train, test, and train. Now, if you'd like to participate in a very cool test coming up, the last type of test like this we did, we had more than 1,000 companies, not people participate, but companies. And it's a virtualized stress test. That's hard to say, a virtual stress test. And we are going to simulate a cyber breach. And so get your teams in a conference room and let's go to it. The next one after that will be in June. It will be on communicable illness. We're very excited. We have some really exciting featured presenters on those sessions. And of course, the bottom line is give us a call. Let us talk to you. Let us work with you. You can visit our website at firestorm.com and download a presentation of this webinar. There will also be a link to video on our YouTube channel of this webinar if you'd like to share it with others. And as always, thank you to the Greater Rochester Chamber of Commerce and the Association of Contingency Planners. Dr. Redmond, we appreciate your time. And any closing comments?
Yeah, I have to say I found it very, very interesting. My daughter is a data scientist. She had to do her whole master's in data analytics and also had to do a master's portion for it in social psychology to figure out what people needed, what information. So definitely quite a field.
We need to talk to her. We should do a session with her. I love that idea.
Well, that'd be great. She's actually spoken at several different conferences around the world. So, yeah, definitely put you in touch with her. I'm very proud of her, you know, but she's also extremely successful.
You made some good decisions, and so did she. So we would look forward to that. Thank you again for your support. I'm sorry, I have a little delay on my phone. I didn't mean to step over you there.
It's interesting. Many years ago, when I was in my 20s, I had a job with the military. I was in the military, and part of my responsibility was to come in every morning and just read all the newspapers to tell the 3 generals what they needed to know the day so they could make their decisions. It took me an hour in the mornings to read all the papers and summarize them and have them ready for them by the time they came in. And, you know, today I had a client just recently this year that had collected all this data on cybersecurity and planning and such for years, and they hired me for 6 weeks to just read through all the material that they had collected and to summarize it down to 20 slides on what they most needed to know. And so it shows you that, you know, the people are collecting data constantly, and they have great repositories, but being able to pull out the information they need is where the critical issues are. As I said, it took me 6 weeks compared to what it took me 1 hour to do many years ago. So quite a difference.
Well, that's a great example. All right, we a little bit over our time, so I apologize. But I always love talking to our friends in New York. So thank you so much. Until next month, our next session. Again, please contact us at webinars@firestorm.com. We have a 1-800 number. And everybody have a great day.
Thank you for the opportunity to be on. Thank you.
Thank you. This will end our session for today.